So in this video, we're going to go back to input function and practice with input function a bit more. So in the first few videos that I made, I talked about input function, and we talked about that input function can take at most one argument. We are going to talk about that in more detail in this video. So let's just have some input function, get some values from user, for instance. So I'm going to create this variable name, and I'm going to ask user for their name. So you can have a message here, what is your name, and you can show that to the user. So as you see, I have my text, I have the question mark at the end, and then before I close it, I have a small, one blank or space there. And that is just for the sake of having a spacing done there, so it's easier for users to see. Information is not glued to the message that you're showing. And it can show you both ways, so you can see the difference between the two. So in this example, you see there is a message, and there's a space, and now cursor is waiting for your response. So I'm going to put Tom, for instance, and that is what it gets. If I don't have this space here, it's not going to change anything about your code, about the information you're passing to it. It is just that information is just glued to the message that you have. I personally don't like that. So, but if you prefer it that way, it's your choice. Right? No one prevents you from doing it. So I always have the space for myself. It makes me to be able to read the message easier, and I think my users appreciate that more. Okay, so what I have so far is I'm getting an input from user, and I'm storing that information into a variable. So I created a safe or a box or a place to store my information, and I'm getting an input from user, and I'm storing that information into that box. I'm placing it there for me to be able to use it later on in my code. So again, you can pass at most one argument to your input. That means you can pass 0. So if I have this one and run it, it's going to see is waiting for your response. So I'm going to put Tom, and then as soon as I do it, it's going to get that information. It's going to assign it to this variable name. So you have that. But again, this is not the best way. I don't prefer this one because user doesn't know, okay, they're waiting and there's no message on the screen. They don't know what they're supposed to do. So it's always good to give them some information about what they need to provide to you. So in this case, you're asking for their name. So if you have that name, and then next I'm going to ask how old they are. So I'm going to get another input, and I'm going to say, how old are you? Right, same thing, same concept. And we are running it, and it's going to ask for the name. Just go with Tom again, and then how old are you? I'm going to say 20, right? I'm not 20, but Tom might be 20. Okay, so we have the information, 2 pieces of information that we are getting from user. So now let's go back to at most one argument. Let's say instead of this message, I want to say, how old are you? This name, whatever that name is it Tom, is it Sarah, is it Alex? Whatever that name is, I want to use that name in the second message I'm showing to the user. I want to personalize it to the user that is using my code, running my code. So here I'm going to say, okay, how old are you? And then I'm going to close this quotation here. First of all, if I just put name here and say close the quotation and so on and so forth, this is different from using the actual name. So if I say Sarah, and then let me maximize it, Sarah, you see it says how old are you, name. Is I using that variable because you are saying a string name. It is different from variable name. So the variable name holds that value, but this is just a string name, Python use it as it is. If it sees something inside quotations, it's going to just take it as the value comes. It's not going to change it for you. It's not going to replace it by anything because it doesn't know that you meant this variable. So how we can change it? First of all, I'm going to close my quotation right here and say similar to print function. Do you remember, like, let me comment this line for a second. So if I have print and if I have how old are you? So if I have this one and then if I have name, name, and then I have another one that is my question mark, and I close this one. If I run this one, ask for name Sarah, and is going to be how old are you Sarah. Right now I'm just using print. This is not an input function, so it shows the information to you the way that we want it. So is it the way to go? So should I say, okay, let's have this age input here. So now we have, very similar to print, we have how old are you, the name, question mark, right? Do you think this would work? So let's run this one. It's going to be interesting, and it all goes back to the number of argument input can accept. So running it, ask for a name, Alex, and here's the error message we are getting. So it says input expected at most 1 argument, but it got 3. That is what we pass. Pass 1, 2, and 3 arguments to it. And that is not the way input can handle information. It can take at most 1 argument. So how can we fix it? I want to use this name. I want to personalize it to my user. I want to have that in the second message I'm showing to the user because I already got the information. Why not use it? So any ideas how to fix it? You can pause the video here and think about all of the stuff that we talked about so far and see if there's anything from the previous materials that we discussed that you can use here to change the 3 arguments that you have into 1. Okay, so pause the video and then think about it for a couple of minutes, see if you can fix it, and then come back and pause the video, which I'm going to talk about how to do it in a second. Okay, so hopefully you figured it out yourself, but if not, that's okay. We are going to use this concept a lot in the future videos, okay? So one of the things that we talked about before was a string concatenation. If you have 2 different strings, if I have hello, which is one string, and if I have another string, let's say word, I can concatenate those 2 arguments and create only 1. So I can say hello word, add them to each other, it becomes 1 string, okay? So out of 2 strings, I'm creating 1. So if you have more than 2, you can also concatenate them into 1. So I have exclamation point at the end. Now I have this string that's a combination of 3 smaller strings. So I'm concatenating them, I'm joining those strings into 1. So that is one thing that you need to remember in examples like this when you want to combine multiple strings into 1. Okay, so let's go back to the statement that we have here. We have this input, we have 1 string, then we have this name, and then we have the question mark. So up to this point, we know this is type of string for sure because it has the quotations around it. We are 100% sure this is type of string because it has quotations around it. What about name? What type is name? Is it a string or something else? If it's not a string type, then you cannot do concatenation. If I have, for instance, let's go back to the shell again to practice. If I have word plus number 4, it's going to give me an error message because you're trying to concatenate two different types and it won't like that. With concatenation, with adding two values to each other, they must be the same type. If they're different types, it's not going to work. It's going to give you an example similar to this one, can concatenate, for instance, string to a string, or list to a list, or integer to like numeric value to numeric value. So it's going to complain about it. So, but we know name comes from input function. And input function always, no exceptions, creates a string type for us. So this is also a type of string. So a type of string, a type of string, a type of string. So they're all good. We can do concatenation and add them to each other. So we have three different arguments. And if we use concatenation, we are creating one argument and then we are passing that one argument into our input function. So I'm going to replace the commas with plus sign, right? That way it's going to concatenate those values to each other and create one string for us. Similar to here, you have three different arguments, you're concatenating them, it creates one string. It's going to do that before it sends it to input function. So it goes inside the parentheses, evaluates what you have in there. In this case, you're concatenating three arguments into one, and then it's going to send it to the input function, and then input function takes that, shows the message, get an input from user, and then all good, and stores that information into age. So let's run this one and see what we get, and if there's anything off, we can fix it. So I'm going to go, what is your name? Let's go Alex. And now it says, how old are you, Alex? So a couple of things here. Since we are using a string concatenation, it's not going to add any spaces or anything. It's different from having or separating arguments with a comma. Comma adds a space for you when it comes to print function. With this one, since you're using concatenation, it's going to be no spaces whatsoever unless you add the space yourself. So here I'm going to add a space after the comma, and I'm going to add a space after my question mark to make them to space in a way that I like. So what is your name? Lily. And then how old are you, Lily? And then it's going to ask for that information, you input it, and it gets the information. So now my name is Lily, and the age is 20. So it stores the information that you have. Okay, makes sense? So the next thing I want to talk about is, okay, let's say you have a value here. So let's change this example to raising a number to the power of another number. So let's say you want to get two values from user, and you want to use the first value as your base and then second value as your power. So I'm going to say, okay, this is my base, and I'm going to say what power of, let's try what base. Okay, let's just say what base. So it asks for the base of a number, and then the second one is going to ask for the power. So you are going to say what power of, and now I want to have that base to get another number, saying, okay, what power of, for instance, 4, and then calculating the result in the next line. So here, again, if I just put base here, what power of base, it is not going to work the way that I want, because it's going to directly get that string base and prints it for me. So if I put this one, what power of, you see base instead of 4, for instance, that I wanted to see. So same example, same concept as the previous one. So if I want to see that, I need to show the base actually. So I'm going to do this one. So what power of, and then I have my base here, and I'm going to have my question mark at the end, right? So I'm going to put a comma. If I run it now, so here is the base, here's the input value, and if I run this one, it's going to give me an error message. Why? Because I'm passing more than one argument to my input function, which it won't like. It doesn't matter how many times you try it, it's going to give you an error message. So how to fix it? You already know how to fix it. I need to combine those arguments into one. So I'm going to replace the comma with the plus and do concatenation. You can fix the spacing and so on and so forth to make it to look the way that you want. So what base and what power of 4. Now you see that value that you got from user in the first example. And then in the next line, we are going to calculate the result. But before that, I want to get into something else. So let's say you get your base and you know at some point you're going to use it as a numeric value. And as soon as I get it, I'm going to convert it to an integer value, right? As soon as I get the second one, I'm going to convert it to an integer value because later on, I want to calculate the result. I'm going to say base to the power of this value that I have, right? I need them to be integer values or any numeric value to be able to calculate this result. So I'm converting them as soon as I get the values and storing them into their variable. Now let's go ahead and run it one more time and see what we get as the result. So if I run it this time, it's going to ask for a base, which is fine, very similar to the previous one. But the second input is going to give us an error message. Why? Let's read the error message. It can only concatenate a string to a string. All right, it worked the previous version. Why is not working now? The reason is now you have this a string type. This is also a string type. You're 100% sure because they're inside quotations. What about base now? Base in the previous example, before I converted that to an integer, was type of string because it was coming from input function. But now I converted that to an integer value, to a numeric value. It is not type of string anymore. It is different. This is a numeric value. So you cannot concatenate a type integer to a type of string. It's going to give you that error message if you do so. How can we fix it? How can we fix it? One way is, okay, I don't want to convert it to an integer right away. I want to wait and do it later on. That is one way of doing it, which I'm going to do in a second. But the second method to do it is, okay, I have this number and I want this number to be type of string, to be able to concatenate it to other strings. So why not use this function? We have this function string, which takes a numeric value, which takes a value in general, and converts it to a string for us. So I'm going to say str, and you see it turns purple because it's a predefined function, and you pass your base to it, your number to it, and it converts it to a string for you. So if we keep it this way, it's all going to be fine. It's going to be all string types. This is a string. This is now a string because you converted that to a string, and this is a string type. So if you run it, we should not get that error message that we got before. So 2 to the power of 4, it is going to go fine without any error messages. Okay, now I had that next line that calculates the result. Why I'm not seeing it? Why it doesn't show that to me? So in line 13, I'm calculating the result. I have base to the power of the number that I'm getting, second. But here, nothing is shown. The result is not displayed. Reason is simple, because you're not printing it. You're not displaying the information that you calculated. Python has the result. If you directly type result here, it's going to show it to you. It's going to show you the result. But since you did not print it inside your program, it's not going to display it. So if I say print result after you calculate that, it's going to display it for you this time. If I have, let's say 3 to the power of 5, is going to show you the result of that. Okay, so that was about input function and the very important concept about input function, that it only takes the string values and it takes at most one argument when you are using the messaging part of it. If you want to show something to the user, you can at most pass one argument. But there are ways that you can combine arguments to each other to create one out of many that you have. Okay? So practice with this one, with this concept is very important. We are going to use it a lot throughout the lectures that we are going to have.